Hi everyone, in this lesson I'll try and make a summary draft of the book of Revelation. Okay, so in the first slide we can see that there are three types of explanation for Revelation. I heard of some pastors saying that there are 1,700 methods of correct way of explaining Revelations, and so we will not be bogged down with all these details and nitty-gritties. But just to understand that, to interpret Revelation, there are generally three ways of doing it. One way is fully spiritual. It's like, for example, the 14,400 Jews will be explained as not Jews, maybe a church, maybe it's a representative of something else. And the truly literal way is like 14,400 Jews are really Jews and they are people of Israel and things like that. But I believe that most of the churches now are in C, spiritual and literal. So there's a mix of this kind of explanation. And so just to briefly mention about a few um, stands and ideas, there are amillennial, post-millennial, and pre-millennial. So we do not have time to touch on all this, but for myself, I would prefer pre-millennial because of certain verses and certain logic. It doesn't mean that this is the only way, but um, because what is important in our life is how we respond to Jesus, and also how we change and repent from all our wrongdoings and sins, and to follow Him, to carry our cross. So this is just a discussion. So I've mentioned that in amillennial, what it says is Jesus is in our heart, and there's no real 1,000 years, and um, the meaning of resurrection is a spiritual one, so it doesn't require an actual 1,000 years. And for the second, post-millennial, what it says is the through the gospel, the church will get better and better, and then Christ will be here. The third type will say that the world is getting worse, and then Christ will come back and conquer it. But even in the third, this is just an explanation of what I just told you. In the third premillennial belief, there's also three types. We have a pre-tribulation, mid-trib, and also post-tribulation. So all these three mentions that the church will be raptured to heaven. I think I spelled wrongly. It should be a rapture. Okay, not rupture. Rupture is a burst of a tire. Okay, so on this we will touch on all three of that. So when is Revelation? When is Revelation talking about? So I give you a timeline. So you have a creation of the world until the end time. So if you can see, we have the first coming of Christ, and we have today, which is you and me. Between today and Revelation is a time that we do not know, because Christ will come suddenly. So what we are talking about, the timeline is in Revelation. It's at the end times. So it's right at the end there. You can see. So I've split Revelation into 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 columns. This is not the only way to make a division of it, but to make it easily understandable. So the first part, we say that is a salutation. This is between Revelation chapter 1, verse 1 to 8. And the second part is basically made up of a vision, and also of the seven lampstand. Okay, so this is Revelation chapter 1, 9 to 20. And the third part, we talk about the seven churches. The seven churches, if you can look at it, is in the country of Turkey today, modern day Turkey. So we have the church of Ephesus, Smyrna. If you look at you put your finger at the graph, at the map, see, if you put Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea, you'll see that you're actually making a clockwise circle. So that is the movement. It's like how you travel from one church to another. It's kind of interesting. And also at the right hand side, bottom right, you can see that I've listed the lessons that we should learn from all the churches. Loss of first love for Ephesus. For Smyrna is faithful in trials. Pergamos, compromised. Thyatira is corrupted. Sardis, a dead church. Philadelphia, small but a faithful church. Laodicea, lukewarm and laid back church. And there are many explanations of all these churches. Some says that they are not like you need to choose just one, but there are multiple perspectives that are correct. Number one, first of the perspective will be each of these churches are actual churches, which I agree, of historical churches that exist during the time of John, and then these are their problems. The second way of looking at it is the churches, the lessons that are learned by all these churches applied to us today. So that's why at every ending of the letters to all these churches, it says, "He who has an ear, let him hear." So that shows that the letter doesn't apply to those days only, but also to us each of us who has an ear. Okay, and then also some people will say that this is debatable. It says that this is from Ephesus down to Laodicea is actually a timeline of the churches. So the church is getting worse and worse. There's certain truth in it, but I also believe that there are all these things in every single ages in the church. Like for example, in the beginning of time, there are churches who lost their first love. There are also churches who are faithful in trials, and also there are churches who are compromised, corrupted, and of course some they are rich, lukewarm, and laid back. That happens, in every single era, but maybe the proportion is a bit different. Okay, after the seven churches, we have this period of time. For now, I will call this the Great Tribulation. It's debatable. Some people say that this is something else. But for this lesson, we will highlight this area as red and call all this column the Great Tribulation. So for now, we will just block it and put it as such. And then the final three chapter actually. Chapter 20 is a millennium, talking about millennium. Chapter 21 to 22 is talking about new heaven and new earth. Okay, so we can see that it's quite easily understandable. It's quite clear actually. So we have salutation, vision, and greetings, seven churches, and then we have great tribulation, millennium, and new heaven and new earth. So the bulk of the revelation is actually talking about the great tribulation. Okay, and this happens to coincide with match with 70th week of Daniel. Okay, if you look at the verse, 77s are decree for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. This is stated in Daniel chapter 9 verse 24. If you look at the small box-like timeline that I've listed there, 70 times 7, and also 7 times 7, 62 times 7, you can have a look at Daniel. What basically Daniel is saying is from the building of Jerusalem up to, if you take 62 plus 7, you get 69. So after 69 times 7, Jesus Christ will come, and then you usher into the church era, of which we do not know the period of time. And then you will end with 1 times 7, which is the final 7. This is the 7 that we are talking about, the Great Tribulation, okay, the red color one. So what I'm trying to say is the book of Daniel actually predicts the last 7 in Revelation, but Revelation has a better perspective and is more details. Okay, and if you look at it, I'm actually splitting it into half for the period of Great Tribulation. So it states that 7, this is basically the same verse, Daniel chapter 9 verse 24, but I've placed it in a Revelation perspective now. So if you look at Daniel chapter 9 verse 27, it says, "He will confirm a covenant." He here means the 666, Antichrist, with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. So what it says is that this is the final 7. The first half of it, okay, he will make a covenant with many. And in the second half, which is the next 3.5 years, he will actually stop offering and call himself God, things like that. So it's quite interesting to see that Daniel has already predicted that many thousand years ago. So now we come to this place. Okay, this is where the pre-tribulation rapture, mid-tribulation rapture, and post-tribulation rapture comes into place. And I realized the rapture is spelled wrongly as well. Okay, it should be rapture, R-A-P-T-U-R-E, not rupture, which is a bursting of tire or something like that. So in these 3 raptures, okay, it's listed here. So Revelation chapter 4 verse 5 states this. So I'm not going to argue which is true, which is not, but I generally prefer pre-tribulation because of a few verses. Okay, but however, we can look at the similarities of all these 3 ideas. So all 3 of these mentions rapture. So we can say that rapture is there, and then all 3 of them mentions tribulation. So we know tribulation is there. At least these 2 we can confirm. Okay, so these are the timeline. So basically, rapture is being taken away. It's harpazo. In Greek, it's harpazo. So just lifted up on the way to heaven to meet Christ. Okay, so um, depending on what your belief is, rapture, I've drawn three places here. And then right at the end of the Great Tribulation, Christ will come back with his saints, which is us, believers, to reign. Okay, so I'm just putting a picture here for easier understanding. So rapture is caught up in the clouds and then coming back again with Christ. So in 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 17 it says, after that we who are still alive are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will be with the Lord forever. Okay, so I'm just listing it again. So there's a second coming of Christ, the same thing as Christ coming back with the saints. This is the timeline. Okay, so now we are peeping into the red box itself, the Great Tribulation. So the first part talks about the seven seals. So we have the white horse, red horse, black horse, pale horse, the cry of the martyr, cosmic disturbance, and then we have a pause before we enter the seventh seal. You will see this pattern repeated throughout the trumpets and also throughout the bowls. So there's a pause in between the 6 and the 7, and then something else will be mentioned. Okay, and then we have the seventh seal open is the golden altar. Okay, so this is a summary. And between the 6 and 7, in this first, the 7 seals, between 6 and 7, we talk about 14,400, Jews that are being sealed. Okay, so as you can see. And then the next, we have the 7 trumpets. Okay, so we have hail and fire and blood for the first one, burning mountain for the second, star, wormwood, sun is smitten, plague of locusts, plague of horsemen, and then we have a pause again between 6 and 7 before we enter the Ark of the Covenant in heaven. So it's a glimpse of heaven. So it is in Revelation chapter 8 to 11. And then between 6 and 7, it talks about the angel with a little book that he gave to John, and he ate it, and then it was sweet as honey, and then it turns bitter. And then also there are the two witnesses. Some say it's Elijah and Moses because of the miracles and the plague that they brought in, like stopping the rain for 3.5 years, and also turning the river to blood. Okay, so this is between the 6th and the 7th trumpet. Next, we have the 7-headed beast. So I made a comparison. In Book of Daniel, it talks about the beast with 10 horns, but in this Revelation, it says the beast with 10 horns, but also 7 heads. So it's more descriptive. So in this particular section, it talks about the woman, child, and dragon. Okay, the woman is a symbolism of Satan. The child, Jesus Christ. Okay, sorry, let me repeat. So the woman is talking about Israel, the child is Jesus Christ, and the dragon should be the Satan. Okay, it's Revelation chapter 12. So you can have a look at that. And then in chapter 13, it's talk about the beast from the sea. And chapter 13, 11, verse 11 to 18 talks about the beast from the earth. Okay, that looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. And then we have the proclamation of 3 angels, with the first proclamation as glory to God and judgment is coming. I'm just giving a summary. And I mean, to read more details, you can look at Revelation chapter 14. But the second proclamation is Babylon is fallen. And the third proclamation is those with the mark of the beast will be tormented in the lake of fire. So it's an encouragement to stand firm, or warning rather to stand firm. Okay, the next column, next division will be on the 7 bowls. So if you can look at the same pattern by now, the first one is the balls, second is blood on seas, blood on river, great heat, darkness, Euphrates dried up, and then we have a pause before the last bowl is poured out and it's hail. So you can see that all the sevens, the 7 trumpets, the 7 seals, even the 7-headed beast, and now the 7 bowls, they are all talking about plagues. Okay. And finally, the last column we have this. It's like I combine all of this under this box. I put it under the heading of Armageddon. Okay, it's the final war before the millennium. Don't confuse that with the war of Gog and Magog, which is after the millennium. So this is before the millennium, right before it. So we have Armageddon in Revelation 16, the Christ coming down to challenge the Antichrist and fought and won. And the second part talks about the scarlet woman and the scarlet beast, and the fall of Babylon the Great, marriage supper of the Lamb. And by the way, the Babylon is, if we look at Book of Genesis, Nimrod, or even way before it, Tower of Babel. Many people say it's the area of Babylon. So I mean, at the end of the day, it ends there as well. It starts there and ends there, because Tower of Babel is where people start to go against God and be disobedient. And number 4, we have marriage of the supper lamb, Christ and the church, and also number 5, beast and army seated by Christ. So it's a good ending for us. Then that whole thing summarized the Great Tribulations, and then right after that, Christ's second coming. We have the event of Christ's second coming, and then at this period of time, Christ come back with his saints, and then at this period of time, Satan is being bound for that 1,000 years millennium. The beast is defeated. The false prophet is also defeated. This is what we call the unholy trinity: the beast, the Satan, beast, and false prophet. It's trying to emulate God, Trinity, okay, the Holy Trinity. So right after the millennium, where there's no Satan, so basically we look at it as God giving mankind after the tribulation, those who are with the reign of godly people, with righteousness, and then without Satan. Right after the millennium, there are still people who try and go against God. So this is the second battle is the battle of Gog and Magog. Okay, so it's kind of sad. I mean, there are people who will believe in Christ, but also there are people who will still go against God, even without the presence of Satan. And at this point, we will talk about these two resurrections. Okay, it's mentioned in the book of Revelation. So let me read to you in Philippians. It says, what Paul says: I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his suffering, becoming like him in his death, and so somehow attaining to the resurrection from the dead. This is stated in Philippians 3 verse 10 to 11. So I'm focusing on the last line here, attaining to the resurrection. So many of us will say that why should Paul attain to resurrection, since there is definitely a resurrection, I mean, for Christians. So many will argue that the attaining of the first resurrection is for the righteous. For the second resurrection, I mean, there are also people who are saved, but I mean, it's something like you didn't make the mark, so you get a grade B or something like that. Okay, so many will argue that attaining to resurrection for Paul means attaining to the first one, so he works very hard in his ministry. Okay, so for the first resurrection, we have believers, apostles, conquerors, and also those who have not had the mark of the beast, supposed to be OF, not FO. Okay, the mark of the beast. So this is talking about the tribulation period. Okay, so these are the people that will resurrect in the first, resurrect first. Okay, in the first session. So this is considered righteous. And then we also talk about the two judgments. The first one is the judgment seat of Christ. The second is the great white throne judgment. Okay, so don't be too particular about the details. But what we need to focus on to bring us back to focus is to live a life that's worthy of Christ. Okay. So for the judgment seat of Christ comes first. Some says that this is for Christians. The second one will be for believers and others. So why is it so? So it is time for judgment to begin with God's household, and if it begins with us, what will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel of God? It's stated in 1 Peter 4 verse 17. So it says that we will be judged first before others, the non-believers. So some use this as an argument and says this is the bema seat of Christ. Bema is a Greek word. Says that like Olympic, when you run a race and you have a first, second, and third prize. It's not a judgment as per se of a punishment, for criminality, but rather it's a judgment for deciding who gets the first and second prize and who didn't get a prize at all. So to understand this better, this is not about salvation. This is about rewards. Okay, so if you look at the examples in the book of Matthew, chapter 20, the parable of the workers, that is talking about salvation. People who come early or come late still get the coin. So there's no difference. It's similar in saying that those who accept Christ when they're young and those who accept Christ when they're old, they still get to heaven. However, those who accept Christ earlier get to do more ministry work, get to do more work for God, and then
Second part, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11 to 15, the test of fire on our work, that will determine the reward. That means you can be saved, but you might not have any reward because, maybe because we are lazy, maybe because we are not careful in listening from God. So these two, I think, summarizes well what is being stated here on salvation and reward. Now we move on to the second resurrection. This is for all those who are left. I did not put a translation here, I'm sorry. So the rest who are dead. Okay, so we'll look at the following slide later to see who are being judged in this side. Okay, the resurrected ones on the second time, in the second resurrection. Sorry. So for the second judgment, we said that it's a great white throne judgment. In Greek, it says crisis. So if you translate to English, you can understand it as crisis. As in CRISIS. So the great white throne judgment. Firstly, death and Hades will be thrown into lake of fire, so they are destroyed. So there's no more death, there's no more Hades. And then, who are judged in this time, in this period of time? So number one is Satan, of course, right after releasing from 1,000 years of bondage and after fighting the war of Gog and Magog, fallen angels, we said in book of Jude, and then we got to know from Genesis chapter 6, they come down and mingle with women and have children that are, probably uh, monstrous. Number three, millennial believers. So we might have millennial believers as well, but it's not mentioned directly in the Bible, but we believe so. So there's millennial believers that will be judged here as well, because the book of life is mentioned here, and also the unbelievers from the number four, unbelievers from the beginning of time will also be judged here. Okay, so the purpose of millennial is actually to, this is a summary, okay, to give chance to some to accept Christ, and also not under the without the temptation of the evil one, but still man has proven to go against God. So it's a very good period of time for us to see the nature of man. So this is a conclusion. So if we reject God continually, God will actually answer our prayer at the end. I mean, in what way? Because hell is a place without God. So it's literally saying that God says, okay, fine, you don't want me, so have it. Here, let us be. So through this revelation, what we need to do is actually, number one, to live a holy life, to follow God. This will act as a warning to us. And also, secondly, we must remember our loved ones and continually pray for them. Okay, so this is the summary for Revelation. In brief, I've done it in a short manner, but hopefully this will be helpful. And once again, this is the timeline for Revelation. Okay, right at the end over there. Thank you.